Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast, where we're helping ODs all over the country make better and better decisions around their money, their careers, and their practices. I am your host, Evon Mendrin, certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, an independent financial planning firm just for optometrists nationwide. And on today's episode, I am excited to welcome back to the podcast Dr. Bethany Fishbein, CEO of The Power Practice. Bethany and I dive into some of the observations that she has seen around what is the most profitable mode of practice in private practice optometry. And I think the conclusions that she has seen maybe are a little bit unexpected, considering what you hear most loudly right now in terms of what direction private practices should go. We also dive into the importance of knowing the chair cost in your practice, of having data and knowing the data around the patient experience, what decisions patients tend to make when they come in for an eye exam and afterwards, and how to project that forward in decision-making. We talk about the role of specialties in the practices, and we talk about how private practices can guard themselves from larger, maybe corporate competition. So it was a fascinating conversation for me. I hope you'll get a lot out of it as well. If you have any questions on anything we talked about, feel free to reach out to me at Evon, E-V-O-N, at optometrywealth.com. You can check out all the resources and links mentioned in the show at the show notes, which you can find by just scrolling down in whatever app you're using, or at the education hub on our website, optometrywealth.com. And while you're there, feel free to poke around and take a look at the other resources and episodes we've put together. And you can also schedule a no-commitment introductory call to talk about what's on your mind financially and to learn how we help ODs nationwide navigate the financial decisions in their lives. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Bethany Fishbein. And welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast. I am your host, Evon Mendrin, and I have a very special guest back for a second time on the podcast. Would love to welcome back Dr. Bethany Fishbein. Bethany, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me back.
I'm excited to chat with you because you had recently on your Power Hour podcast, which I highly recommend for anyone looking to add awesome optometry-focused content into their lives. But you had some, really the last couple months have been just really good episodes. And the last one in particular I thought was fascinating because you talked about what are some observations that you saw or different factors that have driven some practices to be really financially successful. And you talked about just your observations and some of the different trends that you saw among these practices. And so I'm excited to dive into your observations today and kind of figure out what you learned, because I think having heard it might be, the takeaways might be a little bit unexpected, to what people might expect that to be based on what you hear a lot these days in the optometry profession. So would that be a good way to sort of sum up, what the observations is? It might be a little bit unexpected.
I think so. It's definitely not the things that people are talking about doing to improve their practices. And so as I started to do this work and talk to people and find this out, it was unexpected to me too, but it is clear. And I'm looking forward to talking more about it.
So let's dive in here. And when you talk about, you've talked about seeing over the years, you've seen hundreds of practices, and you talk about these observations and conversations you're having. Who are you having these conversations with? Where are you gathering these observations from? Is it your clients at the Power Practice? Is it just through your peers in the profession? Where are you seeing these things?
So a lot of it comes from our clients at the Power Practice. We're doing practice management consulting. So we are looking at so many different practices and analyzing what's working and what's not working, helping practice owners reach their goals. We also have the opportunity to talk to people who aren't yet our clients, and potential clients. And part of what we do is look at their numbers and look for opportunities and ways we might be able to help them. And now in this role, just talking to some people throughout the industry, I get calls and emails from somebody saying, hey, do you have a couple minutes? Can you give some advice on this? And I'm happy to do that, to get to see information from a different practice. So mostly our clients, not all of them, but all optometric practice owners who are making good amounts of money.
Yeah. And in fact, you mentioned you've seen a group of high producing doctors, single ODs. So whether it's a single practice owner as the sole doctor or an associate, generating over $1 million gross collected revenue, right? So these are well over, right? So these are, whether it's a practice owner as the sole doctor or whether it's an associate, that single doctor, based on the conversations and observations you're saying, that single doctor is generating well over $1 million of collected revenue. So what is driving that? Based on your observations, what you've seen, what is driving the ability for that doctor in that practice to generate that kind of collected revenue? And maybe we should, even before we get into that, what does profitability look like? Because it's one thing to talk about collected revenue, but what does the profitability of those practices actually look like after expenses have been taken out?
So the profitability is the important question, because $1 million of collected revenue doesn't sound nearly quite as appealing if it's generating $60,000 of net profit compared to if it's generating $350,000 of net profit. And I'll say that these practice owners that I'm talking to have practices that are doing this are not necessarily collecting the highest percentage of revenue as net. So these might be at 20%, 25%, not 35, 40% that we can see in practices that are doing things differently. So these are not the highest percentage of net to collections practices, but what they are the highest dollars of net revenue practices.
Got it.
So the number at the bottom of the financial statement is the largest number.
Got it. Okay.
That's what I'm looking at.
So and when you say net, then you're talking about 40 or 30 to 40, 25 to 40. You're talking about the owner's compensation, including salary plus profit. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
What the owner is able to take out of that business
in total.
What's the owner's net, the owner's profit, not necessarily their take home. Obviously debt and stuff comes out of that, but what that profit line shows.
Got it. Okay. And so what is driving that then? I mean, because it's not necessarily the highest profit margin, meaning the profit as a percentage of the revenue they're bringing in is not the highest percentage, but it's the highest dollar. They're still taking higher dollar amounts home at the end of the day. So what is driving that ability to create the higher amount of revenue and at least the higher dollar amounts of profitability?
It's crazy, right? That I feel like this is such a revelation to say it. It's eye exams.
It's routine primary care eye exams.
Eye exams.
Yeah.
Very often, eye exams build to vision plans.
And is that what you hear most often? Where the direction of private practices should go? Do you hear a lot of private practice owners, declaring publicly like you should do more primary care eye exams? Is that what you hear? I don't hear that. Do you?
No, I'm reading the same stuff you are, and you never hear that. And so everybody, how do I make more money? Everybody's talking about medical billing, diving into specialties, doing less primary care, more other stuff, which is why it feels shocking to look at these high revenue generating practices, both in collected money and net profit, and start to ask them questions. What are you doing? What are you doing? And one after another, they're saying, eye exams and glasses. And it's not what people are saying out there. But I will say after I posted my podcast episode, and I felt like a little nervous, like pushing that post button. Like I actually messaged the virtual assistant who does this, and I messaged her midnight the night before. I was like, don't post that tomorrow. I have to listen to it. And I never listen to myself. And I listened. I was like, you know what? I'm just doing it. But I got emails after from several practice management people who said, I'm glad you said it. That's exactly what I'm seeing too. So it's not just me.
So a question that comes to mind is that, okay, it's not the highest profit as a percentage of revenue, right? So the profit margins, the percentages are not as high, but the dollar amounts are definitely higher. The question that comes to my mind after hearing that is, well, do you have to make up for that with high volume? Do you have to have a volume of patients that's unsustainable or that leads to burnout or that's just not fun to practice within that practice? What are you seeing in terms of patient volume in order to generate that?
So the patient volume is absolutely higher, but not to a level where it's not fun or not sustainable. And I just want to say, I'm not saying that this is the path to success that every single person should take.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that at all. So, you know, it's not about that. It's really just defending this as a solid way to potentially make a lot of money with something that we all know how to do coming out of school. And if specialties are your area of interest and you love them and you want to do more of that, that is also a pathway to make money. All I'm saying is that the people that I've spoken to who are consistently making the most are doing eye exams and selling glasses. They're doing some specialty care too, but their primary focus is on optometric primary care.
Yeah. I like the way you frame that because it's right. You're not saying this is what you should do. Maybe you are pushing back against others that say there's a certain way you should do things, because I think you and I both have heard, you probably way more than I have, you should move away from primary care routine eye exams. You should move more into specialty focused care or medical, right? And maybe you're pushing back a little bit there by saying, hey, here's an observation you have. You see these practices are still successful focusing on routine eye care, right? Routine eye exams. And that's just an observation you're seeing. You're saying, hey, this is still a way you can do business and do it well and still be financially successful in the practice, which ultimately leads to financial success out of the practice. I think that's a really good way to frame that.
Yeah, and you can do that and still do your specialties and still reach your goals, whatever those goals are.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be as like
black or
much
white,
of a paradigm shift
one or the other.
as it is.
Yeah.
No, it's not. But every practice has to focus on something. You have to focus your attention on something. And as people start to shift their focus away from primary care, it's feasible that in doing that, they might be on one side of the coin making more per encounter or not, but on the other side of the coin, changing the brand and the DNA of their practice to something that's not as profitable as where they started.
Yeah.
And they might choose to do that, knowing all the facts, and choose to do it anyway, which is absolutely fine. But I think the people that are doing that and switching that mindset with the goal of making more money might be missing the boat a little bit.
Yeah. And in your podcast conversation, you mentioned that these doctors are just taking care of the needs of the primary complaint of the patient as they come in. And they're not sort of guiding them or funneling towards any particular thing that they have on their mind. It's really just, okay, what is the complaint of the patient, and let's take care of that. And that's what you're seeing. And on the topic of focus, you've also described that they are focusing, or they are monitoring their schedules in the practice very closely to focus on routine eye exams and building other exams, other services around that, right? Can you talk a little bit about that, how they're monitoring the schedule really closely and being really intentional about which type of exams are ending up on the calendar?
Yeah, so that was really the first commonality I noticed in talking to the doctors and managers of these practices that are doing this. And it was a noticeable difference in the way that they talked about scheduling their patients. So you hear that one doc is producing 1.5 million. How are you scheduling is like a natural first question. And you expect them to say, oh, we're scheduling patients every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, every half hour. That's like the answer I would usually expect to that question. And when I asked it to these practices, they said, oh, yeah, well, we're always making sure we're getting 16 routine exams a day. And then they went on to whatever else they're doing. And a different one says, well, we always want to make sure we get 18 completes a day. And same thing, goes on to whatever else they're doing. So they're holding the need to complete whatever number they've set, and 16, 18, those are real numbers. These are not 36 eye exams a day.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure that we get these in. And then one of them was actively working to reduce the number of medical visits. He said, I'll treat it if they really want me to, but I'll refer to the optometrist up the street, because he loves treating that.
Yeah. And
one I spoke to only took vision plans, didn't take the medical plan. So I'll treat your glaucoma, but you have to pay for it. Another one said, well, yeah, we'll do a visual field. We double book it with the first exam in the morning and the first exam after lunch, or we have a half day blocked a week where we do these. But their focus was on a number of complete comprehensive eye exams they wanted to get done in a given day or a given week.
And that's 16 to 18. That's maybe roughly, if you're open 8 hours a day, that's maybe two exams an hour, right? That I'm not an optometrist, but what I've heard, that doesn't seem overwhelming volume. It seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah. You take a lunch, it's, 2 an hour, maybe with one extra thrown in the morning, one extra thrown in the afternoon, 2 exams an hour with one of the other things added in. So that's the most common schedule I see in these practices, is we do 2 exams plus one other visit every hour, which is not super undoable. And what they do, if that's the goal and that starts to feel overwhelming for the provider, what can we do so that it doesn't feel overwhelming? So instead of saying, okay, you're overwhelmed, now you only do 12, they're saying, okay, you're overwhelmed. What's overwhelming? Oh, all this charting. Okay, would a scribe help? What's overwhelming? Oh, after this, I have to write all these letters to primary docs. Would a virtual assistant help? Would, I have to do all this history. Could we cut 5 minutes off the exam by letting someone else do that? So the providers need to do these appointments is what is set in stone, and everything else around the practice is developed to support that. If it takes an extra person, it takes an extra person.
Yeah. And you've mentioned the optometrist is the producer of revenue in a practice, right? Their work, your work for patients is what actually is going to produce revenue in that practice. And you've observed that these practices do whatever they can to make that doctor's time more efficient, where they're focusing on work with patients, the things that are most highest and best use of their time, and they're finding whatever other way to take everything else off their plate, right?
To a degree, like you could probably really lean all the way into that and be like, oh, an optometrist spends 6 minutes with a patient, they could see 10 patients an hour.
Yeah.
There aren't too many optometrists that want to do that.
Yeah.
And so the people that are doing this are not unhappy. They're not churning, like they're just doing a full day, largely full of primary care.
It's something you talked about too, and we talk about scheduling and like really sort of being intentional about how things are scheduled. And you talked about some of the financial aspects of where that really ties back into. And you talked about these practice owners are really and constantly analyzing what drives the profitability of their practice, which services, which exams are profitable, and trying to find that balance or intersection between what is profitable and what they enjoy the most, right? Sort of leaning heavily into where those things intersect. And you talked about this idea of chair cost. Can you talk a little bit about how they're looking at what drives the profitability in the practice, and what is chair cost? What does that actually mean?
There's kind of two different answers here. So chair cost is how much it costs you, the practice owner, to open your office and be ready for business for that day, that hour, that exam slot. So to figure out your chair cost, you take all of your non-cost of goods expenses. So this is your rent, your occupancy costs, your staffing costs, any your lawyer, your accountant, your bookkeeper, like whatever your non-cost of goods expenses are. And if you look at that for a year, you've got some big number that tells you this is, before you saw one patient, the cost of having an office with an open door, lights on, computer system, smiling staff members, an optical inventory on the walls. Like, this is what it costs to have an office that people can come to for a year. And then you start to break it down. So you take that number and you divide it by 12, or you could look at it month to month if you really want to. And you say, this is our cost per month to be open. So it's good to know that number, because you start, it's the first day of the month, you start collecting revenue. And it's helpful to know that the first $30,000, $50,000, $75,000, depending on the size of your practice, goes towards just keeping you open. And then you say, okay, that's a month. We work 20 days in a month. Here's how much we need to earn per day to cover our costs. And then even further, here's how much we need to earn per hour. So they know what that number should be. And then they start to look at all of the different things optometrists can do and analyze those activities to see what each of those is likely to generate per hour. So people tend to think of it almost on too granular a level. Like, I can get $80 for this insurance visit, or I can get $120 if I code a little bit differently and make it a medical visit. 120 is more than 80, so therefore I should do that. But the people who are really doing a great job with this look at what else happens after that. So if I see a patient who comes in, I'm just here for an eye exam, I have a vision plan, I say, great, I do the eye exam, I bill their vision plan, and I prescribe a pair of glasses, and they go out to the optical and get the glasses. And these practitioners know that 62% of those people will go out and get the glasses. I made up that number. It's different in every office, but they look at that as an average versus, well, I see this patient, they come in thinking they have a vision plan, but they're over 45, and pretty much everybody over 45 has a little bit of dry eye or cataract or something. Oh, yep. So do your eyes ever bother you when you're on your computer? Yeah, a little bit. And now I've got the mindset, I'm going to turn this into dry eye. So I'm talking to the patient about their medical insurance, and I'm talking about dry eye and potential treatments for dry eye, and, a treatment plan and what we should do about this. And by the way, here's the script for your computer glasses. So maybe that patient, because I talked about dry eye for that conversation, you average it out, maybe 30% of those people end up getting that pair of glasses. So which is better, right? I collected more on the exam, but the time that I had to talk to the patient, I spent talking about the difference between vision and medical. I spent talking about dry eye treatments. I spent talking about the potential causes of a problem that maybe they didn't even know they had. I'm not saying they don't have it, but there's only so much time and there's only so much information that a human brain can synthesize. So they left thinking, well, he said that maybe these drops would solve my problem. So I think I'm going to go get those, because if I could just get a thing of drops or get glasses, I'd rather get the drops. Maybe I'll just try that. And if it doesn't work, I'll get and 6 weeks later, they've forgotten the whole conversation.
Yeah.
So it's what happens after that creates the total encounter. Now, I'll let you talk in a second. I'm sorry. I know I've got my podcast host hat on here, but the thing is, this is assuming somebody comes in with a routine exam complaint, a routine complaint. If somebody comes in and says, "Doc, my eyes are so dry. I'm miserable day in and day out. Can you treat this?" That pulls you in a different direction, and that's not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, and to go back to, I guess, where we started there, is that you've got these fixed costs just to be open, right? Just to have that chair available, just to have that exam lane open, to have staff available, whatever it is, right? You have certain costs just to have the doors open. And so when you start to break that down into costs per month, costs per day, costs per hour, or even costs per exam, then you can kind of think and say, okay, I need to, at minimum, at a very base minimum, I have to earn enough per hour or per exam to cover that chair cost, right? For that patient to have the ability to sit in that chair, I need to earn in revenue at least a certain base amount in order to cover my expenses for that ability, right? So there's that thinking, and then you have to be intentional about, okay, like we talked about earlier, those practices are intentional about how they fill that time, how they fill the calendar. And in your podcast, you mentioned sort of this trade-off between, yes, you can prioritize medical or a specialty, and the base revenue for that exam may be higher, right? Maybe 100 and something or whatever it is. And you might compare that only to the, quote unquote stereotypical, like the $40 eye exam, right? You may compare that and say, why would I not put all of my time and energy into that medical or into that specialty exam? Why would I spend any amount of time or effort with these routine eye exams? But what you just mentioned is true, is that it's not just the eye exam. It's as a result, as a natural course of that visit, what are the other tests that are happening along with that exam? What are the other glasses and contacts that are happening as a natural result of those conversations, right? It's that whole client interaction that really defines what you need to look at. It's not just that $40 reimbursement for the eye exam, right? It's really that whole client experience. And what are you earning in revenue for that entire client experience? Sure, the floor for a routine eye exam may be much lower, because there's a chance you're only going to get that lower amount. But the potential per visit is actually much higher with that routine eye exam versus that medical or routine. So it's almost like, you're getting something with those specialty or medical exams, right? It may be a little bit higher, but the potential per visit is actually higher with the routine eye exam. Like, did I sort of run that through my head appropriately? Is that sort of what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, there's always the possibility that the medical eye exam will walk out and buy 4 pairs of glasses. Like,
Right.
it exists. But
Yeah.
when you analyze what actually happens, it's far less likely. And so if, in the examples I gave before, I was talking about, a glaucoma follow-up, unless that glaucoma follow-up says, oh, by the way, I forgot to pick up my 3 pairs of glasses, which doesn't happen often, there's a fixed amount. And the fixed amount that you're going to get is higher than the floor eye exam.
Yeah.
But is way lower than the potential eye exam that is likely to get product.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned, of course, the importance of like being able to look at this data to see what the and I don't know, maybe you can talk about how you would even track it, but you talk about like knowing the statistics in your practice to have a reasonable guess to say, if a patient comes in for this type of visit, roughly to expect what the outcome might be, right? X percent of them tend to do this, X percent of them then go on to purchase glasses, X percent of them contacts. Like, talk to us about how you would even gather the information and review the data to say, okay, I know the statistics of my patients really well. I know what to expect. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how that would work?
Yeah. When you look at your practice metrics, whether you're doing it through your own report or through Edge or Glimpse or any of the programs, you're really getting big averages. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to break down individual data or individual behavior trends or behavior patterns from those big numbers. That'll tell you did 400 eye exams last month, 220 people bought glasses, but it doesn't tell you the individual likelihood of a consumer. So you have to dig a little bit and look at a sample of individual patients. And it's a little bit time consuming. You don't have to do it all that often. But if you're curious, you can run a report of your month and pick a date 3 months ago so that all the insurance payments have come in already. And you say, I'm going to look at the behavior, the spending of people with a 92 code versus a 99 code. If you use 92 codes for routine eye exams and 99 codes for medical visits, or if you use 92 codes all over the place, but some you do with a vision plan myopia diagnosis and some you do with a medical plan dry eye, whatever primary diagnosis. And so you put the work in. It's an interesting exercise. It's an interesting use of a couple of hours of your time. And so you come up with a list. It doesn't have to be huge. 25 patients where you saw a routine exam patient and billed to their vision insurance and see what happened. And 25 patients that came in for a routine exam, but you found a medical condition and therefore you billed to their medical insurance and see what happened. And you look at the results. Very often when we do this, it's like the 7th or 8th one, and you're like, oh, there's a trend here. Like, it starts to come out pretty quickly, and the more you do just is further evidence on this trend.
Yeah.
But it's looking at it at that level. And this is what big companies do. This is how Target knows that people who are likely to buy, people who buy this product are likely to buy this other product, or, you've read this stuff, people who buy this combination of products are pregnant, but they haven't told anyone yet. Like, You can find
Amazon's got that figured out, dialed into a T. They know what you will purchase next, and they will present it to you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
While they're listening to you in your kitchen, they know exactly what you're going to be interested in. But this is a very rough way to do that kind of data analysis in your own business.
Yeah.
So it might be 25 people. You're looking at all the money collected. You can look at what the expenses were if you want to get really granular with it. But you see, and some of those visits maybe led to other things, like an eyeglass purchase, like a contact lens purchase. That counts. If they led to a specialty visit, you note that. How many did what you wanted them to? As optometrists, as doctors, that's super important, and it's a metric that people don't track. They track capture rate to know, like, it's a financial metric. But somebody who got glasses in your office, if that was the solution to their problem, it's worth looking at who did what you told them to do, who walked out with a solution, because not only is it about immediate value of the patient, but lifetime value. Somebody where you made a recommendation, they followed it, and now they see better or feel better, their complaint is resolved. Of course, they're going to see you next year. Yeah.
And I think what's important to that is that that information helps you to project out what ifs. You can't project out information and try to make decisions in your business without having that information in front of you, without putting the time and the effort to gather it, to look at it, to start to notice these trends. Because if you wanted to sit down and say, well, what if I had a schedule full of primary eye care exams? What would that do to my financials, and what would that do to my practice? Well, you have to have an idea of where that primary eye care exam leads next, right? If you know that X percent of those patients does this next thing, and then X percent of those does this next thing, and that leads to this financial outcome, that leads to this revenue outcome, then you can start to project that out into the future and make decisions based on that.
That's like so key what you just said there, because that's so opposite how a lot of practice owners make decisions.
Yeah.
And when you have that data in front of you, it's so easy.
Yeah.
They don't know how to get it, or they don't want to put the time into getting it, or they feel they don't have the time to put into getting it. But yeah, when if you're thinking about this and you think, I got to get around to deciding if I want to see more primary care patients, and you have one of those mornings where a family of 4 comes in and they've got the insurance and they don't want anything but what their plan covers, and they're all in the exam room and they spilled a juice box, you're like, nah, I'm not doing that. There's no way. Right? Where if the first 4 by multiple pairs, it just,
right.
It's about how you feel. When you look at the numbers, it eliminates that, and it makes it really clear to be able to have the data to make a decision. Your decision doesn't have to be, I want to do primary care all day, but it's, okay, maybe I don't. Here's what's the potential cost of that.
Right.
And then you decide.
At least you can project out these what ifs and know what the numbers would relatively be. I mean, with all the uncertainty, but at least you can show yourself the what ifs based on real numbers, and then make a decision, knowing whatever your decision leads will have either the opportunity cost of not doing it or the potential benefit of doing it, right? At least you can see those numbers in front of you. So knowing all that, knowing that you've observed now that practices that focus on primary care can still be successful in 2023 and beyond, where do specialties fit in? Like, where do specialties fit in terms of differentiation, in terms of marketing, in terms of focus of the business? Like, where does all that fit in?
They can fit in wherever the practice owner wants them to fit in.
Okay.
So specialties in a practice that says, I want this primary care income, then specialties become an additional service that the practice provides. The patient flow into the specialties is driven by the primary care practice. So when it comes to marketing dollars, a practice that's focused on primary care is spending their marketing dollars to get eye exam and glasses patients into the office. And they know that of 100 primary care patients that they see, that's going to funnel 6 into their myopia treatment program or whatever their specialty is. So they choose to drive patients into the specialties through that path. And then when they're doing the specialties, they also know the value of their time because they know their chair cost and they know what a primary care schedule generates. So they know that if they're taking away 4 exam spots, 5 exam spots, 6 exam spots by doing their specialty, they know how to price the specialty services so that the money per hour generated is the same or higher or lower. And then they're making a conscious decision to do that.
Yeah.
So they fit because there's something that doctors are interested in, something that many of them love to do, something that breaks up the monotony, something that feels challenging and feels exciting, and are producing amazing outcomes for the patients. They're also differently profitable when you look at just collected money for doing the service minus the cost of goods for the actual service. These are the ones that usually have the highest percentage. But to not feed those through a primary care practice, there are other expenses that you're not thinking about, like significant marketing expenses. Would your specialty be enough to cover your cost of goods? So you look at it and you make it fit. Sometimes a practice owner will choose to spend more of their time in their specialty area and have an associate doing a lot of the primary care, generating revenue, feeding the specialty, and the practice owner is collecting based on the primary care because they get a percentage of that too, and using those patients to build their specialty and generating more per patient, but have an associate seeing more patients. So a specialty can be a phenomenal part of the practice. It's too often that people, though, are making choices that result in them doing it at a loss, not necessarily a loss like they're not collecting what they're spending. That's not it. It's a loss in opportunity cost of what else they could have used that time or those marketing dollars for.
Yeah. And I think a part of that is, at least just from what I hear, and maybe I think you've heard some of the same stuff too, but a part of that is this effort to deepen and broaden services to sort of guard private practice from the online eye exam, or, XYZ threat to private practice. So I think you're observing that maybe that's not necessary. What does private practice optometry need in order to guard itself from XYZ threat like online eye exams? If it's not only specialties, what does a private practice need in order to differentiate, to build that trust in their patients and community, and to remain a robust profession and business in the face of all of those threats?
It's such a solid question, right? I think that the primary eye exams and glasses segment is probably at the highest risk from those threats. over all of the other stuff that optometrists do. Is it at the risk of going away completely? I don't think so. But if you build a practice on this and all of a sudden insurance reimbursements decrease, a big company in your area changes their provider, somebody comes to town with a really amazing remote refracting system, like I think the risk is higher to that than somebody who's the only person in a 3-state area that can fit a custom made contact lens or a highly specific amount of prism that no one else can do. So it's a legitimate question. I think that one of the things that an office who wants to do this can do to protect themselves against some of those things is that they can be and should be doing a frequent analysis of those business numbers so that if something changes, they're able to recognize it and adapt to it as soon as it changes.
Yeah.
Instead of 6, 7, 8 months later, where they've realized, and now not necessarily it's too late, but now they've lost the potential of those months. So the other people that are doing online eye exams, online eyeglass sales, online contact lens sales, those are businesses that are fully in tune with their customers. They know how long people are spending on their site. They know which frame sells the highest and which frame sells the lowest. They're adjusting pricing on the highest and adjusting pricing on the lowest. They're making business decisions. And that's the other piece that the real successful primary care practice owners are doing is they're watching those numbers, and when they're not getting results that they want, they are constantly analyzing to see how they can be better. So in a practice with a provider that's not a great communicator, that's just not presenting solutions or recommendations in a way that the patients are likely to get them, they can be doing primary care. Maybe they've got a capture rate of 25%. So they run their numbers and they say 3/4 of these people aren't getting glasses anyway. Of course, it's going to be more worthwhile to do glaucoma or dry eye. At least I'm getting more for the exams. But these really successful practice owners are saying, I'm at 25%. I'm talking to people. I'm having these conversations. I know somebody else out there is at 70. What do I need to do? Whether it's observing someone else, having someone come in and observe them, having a conversation to say, okay, obviously it's me. How do I learn to be better? How do I get these results? And so they're always looking to keep driving those numbers and those metrics to be better. And I think that's what practices have to do to, I don't know that I can even say stay ahead of online sellers, but to at least keep pace and not get left behind.
Well, to remain agile, to keep that ability to change and adapt. And the more you know your business, both the financial numbers as well as the operational numbers, and the more accurate that information is, the more quickly you can forecast different decisions and then make decisions and take action on it. And the more easily you can look back after those decisions have been made and see how it went and then adjust again. Because that's all business is, right? It's just a mess of forecasts and decisions and looking how it went and adapting and forecasting decisions and looking how it went. And just this constant cycle of adapting and changing and improving. And the more you can understand what's going on now, the more easily you can make those decisions moving forward. So what are some final takeaways, I guess, having seeing what you've seen and knowing what you know, and after this conversation, a takeaway for me after hearing what you've talked about is we're definitely not telling people how they should do anything. But I think you've observed that primary eye care can lead to a successful business and a successful financial outcome for the practice owner if they want to go that route. And I think a huge takeaway is just keep searching for that intersection between what is profitable in your business and what you enjoy the most, and lean into that as much as possible. I feel like, and that takes knowing the data and knowing the numbers and being able to use those numbers in decision making. But Bethany, I'll let you take the floor here as sort of the last point. What are some takeaways? What are some action items? What are some things that practice owners should keep in mind after hearing all this?
Practice owners can maybe just take a look at what primary care is contributing or can contribute to your business, especially practice owners who have made a concerted effort to get away from it in the last 1 or 2 years. I would really encourage them to just do some analysis, to look at, I made this change, I'm converting people to medical, I'm working to get additional visits, I'm treating more than I've ever treated. Is it working? And to look at the financials, the collections, the profitability, and also at the metrics within the practice. The other thing that I would ask people to look at is, am I happy with where I am? Somebody who is doing very little primary care, is doing all specialty care, is happy with what they're making, is happy with what their day looks like, don't change a thing. Someone who's doing all primary care and is happy with what they're making and happy with how their day is going, same to them, don't change a thing. But if there's something going on that you're not happy with, either how you're spending your day or what you're taking home at the end of it, do that analysis of the business and figure out what is going to fix the things that are making you unhappy and let you be more professionally and financially satisfied every day. Because at the end of the day, life is too short to do otherwise.
Yep. I love it. Well, Bethany, this has been fascinating. I've loved every second of this, and I could probably go on and on with you throughout the rest of the day. But for any practice owner who needs help with all of this, or wants to learn more, or wants to take a look at their numbers and try to make sense of it, where can they follow you, learn more about what you are doing at the Power Practice?
They can always find information on our website, powerpractice.com. We do an analysis of the financial statement and the billing codes to have an idea of what the practice is doing and what's working and what's not. People can connect with me on LinkedIn and come listen to my podcast, the Power Hour Optometry Podcast, on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on.
Yep. Anywhere you can get your podcast, you can find Bethany and her podcast too. And Bethany, I appreciate your time. For anyone listening, reach out to either of us for questions on anything we talked about today. For any listener, if you have had experience with anything we talked about, or have had similar experiences or different experiences, would love to hear what you've seen and what you've heard and your own experiences here. If you strongly disagree with everything we mentioned today, send all your email to Bethany at the Power. No, I'm just joking.
I'm sure it's coming. Like every time I do this, I feel that. And, it's not, this isn't popular opinion.
Yeah.
And I get that, but looking at one of these after another, it's just the reality.
Yeah. Well, I had fun. I appreciate it. For the listener, appreciate your time, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.
Want more resources to help master your money? Check out the Education Hub on Evon's website at optometrywealth.com. Evon Mendrin is a certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a California registered investment advisor. All opinions of Evon and his guests are their own. This show is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for specific investment, legal, tax, or other decisions. Clients of OWA may own securities mentioned on this show.